I heard whispers in town that my own daughter was trying to take my house. I didn't believe it. How could I? But that night, at dinner, I saw her husband sliding papers toward me, saying I should sign before dessert. My daughter just looked away. It broke something inside me, but I stayed quiet. What they didn't know was I had already hidden the real deed, notarized years earlier, safe where no one could touch it. So when he smirked, whispering, "He won't fight back," I promised myself I would. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my voice reaches. The fluorescent lights in the grocery store flickered slightly, making the aisles feel colder than the October air outside. I was leaning on my cart, a half-filled basket of canned soup and discount bread resting in front of me, when I caught a whisper that wasn't meant for me. Two women by the produce section spoke in hushed tones, but not hushed enough. "You know, that's his daughter. They say she's been moving money around, money that doesn't belong to her." My back stiffened. I didn't turn right away. I kept staring at the bruised apples in front of me, pretending to weigh whether they were worth the 99 cents a pound. Inside, though, something cracked. Marla, my daughter, had always been strong-willed, sometimes reckless, but dishonest. No, I told myself I wouldn't believe it. People gossip in small towns, especially when someone shows a little success. Still, the words clung to me like a burr. I moved down the aisle, my hands a little tighter on the cart. When I finally reached the register, I emptied a small jar of coins onto the counter. Quarters, dimes, even a few nickels rolled across the conveyor belt. The cashier smiled politely, counting them out one by one. It wasn't embarrassment I felt, it was habit. A lifetime of stretching every dollar had made me cautious. As I pushed the cart outside, the autumn wind bit at my face. That's when I saw her. Marla, standing by the passenger side of a brand new SUV, laughing with Darren, her husband. The back of the vehicle was open, bags upon bags of groceries stacked high. I froze. My own purchases barely filled half a sack, but their bounty looked fit for a feast. My gaze dropped to my hands, coin dust still clung to my fingertips, then back to the glossy black SUV with temporary plates. Something inside me twisted. They were young, strong, and seemingly prosperous. "Good for them," I muttered under my breath. A father should feel pride, not resentment. But as I climbed into my old pickup truck, the engine coughing before it settled into a weary rumble, the whispers returned, echoing louder than the engine. "Money that isn't hers." I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles pale. Was it envy speaking in those women, or truth? My thoughts drifted back to a night just a year ago. Marla had called, voice trembling, asking for help with the bills. I had handed her what I could, scraping from my retirement fund without hesitation. She'd hugged me, promised to pay it back. Now, watching her step into leather seats, I couldn't silence the question gnawing at me. If they're doing so well, why did they need my help? The road home stretched quiet, lined with trees shedding their leaves. Each gust of wind scattered another handful of orange and brown across the cracked asphalt. My old truck rattled along, carrying me toward my modest home at the edge of town. Every bump seemed to knock loose another uneasy thought. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered weakly. I carried the bag of groceries inside, placing it on the counter, then stepped back out to the porch swing. The wood creaked beneath me as I sat, letting the cool night settle around my shoulders. Across the street, the neighbor's television glowed blue through the curtains, laughter tracks spilling faintly into the night air. My house, in contrast, was silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every thought you wish you could ignore. I tried to shake it off. Gossip dies as quickly as it spreads. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not about my daughter. She was raised better than that. She knew the value of honesty, of hard work. Still, the image of that SUV haunted me. The shine of it, the way Darren slapped the hood with pride. It didn't fit with the story of a couple struggling to pay bills. The swing creaked again as I leaned back. I thought of all the nights I had worked overtime, of the coins I had saved one by one for Marla's schooling, of the mortgage payments I had sweated over so she could grow up in a stable home. That kind of sacrifice leaves scars a child never sees. And now I wondered if she remembered. The sky darkened, stars peeking through the veil of dusk. I whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear, "No, she wouldn't do that to me." My own voice sounded thin, almost desperate, against the night air. But the women's words repeated again and again, their cadence now etched into my mind. I shut my eyes, hoping sleep would drown them out. Instead, I saw Marla's face, smiling as she closed the trunk of that SUV. And then it struck me, if there was truth in the whispers, pretending not to know wouldn't protect me. I had spent a lifetime overlooking small signs, telling myself family comes first, that loyalty means trust without question. But this time, something told me to be vigilant. I opened my eyes to the dark street, resolve beginning to settle like a stone in my chest. My life had taught me one thing: when doubt grows roots, you don't pull it out by ignoring it. You dig deeper until you find the truth. That night, as the crickets filled the silence and the swing rocked gently beneath me, I made a decision. Whatever it cost me, I had to watch her. The morning light was sharp against the windshield as I pulled into the parking lot of the local bank. I had no grand errand, just a routine stop to update my mailing address for some monthly statements. These visits were usually quick, uneventful, but as soon as I stepped up to the counter, I sensed something was off. The young teller, a polite woman who'd known me for years, hesitated when she looked at her screen. Her eyes flickered up at me, then back down. "Mr.
Pierce,"
she said carefully,
"I just want to confirm. Your daughter and her husband were already in last week. They updated some things on your accounts."
My stomach tightened.
"Excuse me, what things?"
She bit her lip, glanced at the man working 2 stations over, then lowered her voice.
"Just some updates. I don't have the full note here, but it says everything's current."
I leaned forward.
"I didn't authorize any changes."
Her fingers hovered nervously over the keyboard.
"Well, it shows signatures, so—"
She stopped herself, forcing a smile.
"Would you like me to print a summary for you?"
I shook my head slowly. My pulse had picked up. I didn't want to tip my hand. Not yet. "No, that's all right. I'll look over my paperwork at home." I thanked her, took my receipt for the small update I'd actually come for, and walked out, my chest buzzing with unease. By the time I slid into my truck, my hands felt clammy against the steering wheel. My daughter, my Marla, what business did she have altering my accounts? And Darren, he never respected boundaries, always acting like every conversation was a deal to be won. I tried to calm myself, telling my heart to slow down, but the thought wouldn't leave me. What had they touched? What had they claimed? I didn't head home. Instead, I asked to speak with one of the junior clerks I knew from church. He met me near the side office, papers in hand. His voice was cautious, but his words cut clear. "Mr. Pierce, I really shouldn't say anything, but I want you to be aware. There's a power of attorney on file." The world tilted. "What did you just say?" "A power of attorney," he repeated. "It gives them authority to act on your behalf for financial matters." He looked down, clearly regretting saying it aloud. It was signed, filed, and scanned. I felt my throat tighten. "I never signed such a thing." His eyes flickered with sympathy, but also fear of losing his job. "I'm not supposed to disclose this much. You may want to talk to your family." I forced a smile, though my insides were burning. "Of course. Thank you for looking into it." I walked out, shoulders squared, trying not to show the storm inside. If I lost my composure here, I'd lose everything. The cafe was only a block away, its bell jingling cheerfully when I opened the door. I spotted Marla at a corner table, tapping her phone. She looked up, surprised. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I sat down slowly, studying her face. "Had some errands at the bank. Thought I'd grab a coffee after." Her eyes darted down, then back up. "Oh, everything all right?" Before I could answer, Darren walked in, smelling of expensive cologne. sliding into the booth beside her. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour," he said with a grin too wide, too slick. "What's this about the bank?" I kept my voice even. "They mentioned some updates. Said you two were already there." Marla blinked, her expression carefully neutral. "Updates? I don't know what you mean." Darren leaned forward. "Probably a clerical thing, old man. Those systems always get confused. Don't let it bother you." My jaw tightened. "Clerical errors don't file themselves." Marla reached for my hand, her smile forced. "Dad, you worry too much. Honestly, everything's fine. Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill." But her eyes, those eyes avoided mine, and Darren's smirk never wavered. I knew then. They were lying, together, in tandem. I stood abruptly, leaving my coffee untouched. "I'll see you both soon." My voice was calm, but my chest thundered. Back home, I paced the living room, the floor creaking under each step. Memories came unbidden. Nights I stayed late at the factory so Marla could have tuition paid in full. The years after her divorce, when I kept the house afloat with my savings just so she and Callie had stability, all that sacrifice, and this was how I was repaid, with forged papers and silent theft. I pressed my palms against the mantel, leaning into the weight of my own anger. "I won't be erased from my own life," I muttered. The words didn't feel like a promise. They felt like armor. Outside, the evening shadows grew long, spilling across the yard. I sat down heavily, the old chair groaning beneath me, and closed my eyes. Marla's face at the cafe replayed in my mind, smiling too fast, dodging too carefully, and Darren, with that practiced charm, as if he believed I'd always be too old, too slow to catch on. But I wasn't slow. I wasn't finished. That night, as crickets chirped and the house settled around me, I turned their denials over and over. If they forged one paper, what else had they already taken from me? The night was quiet, almost too quiet. When the buzzing of my phone startled me out of sleep, I blinked at the red numbers on the alarm clock. 12:47 a.m. At my age. I rarely woke at such an hour unless something was wrong. I fumbled for my glasses and reached for the phone, its glow cutting through the darkness. A bank alert flashed on the screen. Unusual activity detected. Withdrawal attempt declined. For a moment, I thought I'd misread it. Maybe it was a system glitch. But the words burned steady, unchanging. My throat tightened, and I sat up straighter in bed. Another buzz came. Same alert. Same account. I stared at the device, the silence of the house pressing in around me, making the sound of my breathing seem too loud. I didn't call anyone. Pride held me back. I wasn't going to wake a neighbor or ask a favor like some helpless man. I climbed out of bed, pulled my robe tighter against the October chill, and went downstairs. The hardwood creaked as I walked into the kitchen. The phone clutched in my palm like a lifeline. I sat at the table, the glow of the screen casting long shadows across my lined hands. Logging into my account took longer than it should. My fingers felt heavy, every keystroke deliberate. When the screen finally loaded, my breath caught. There they were. Multiple transfers, small amounts, not enough to trigger immediate suspicion, but steady, each marked with my daughter's name. The betrayal stared back at me in black and white, undeniable. I leaned back, the chair groaning beneath me. My mind scrambled to rationalize. Maybe it was Darren. Maybe he had found some twisted way to loop her into this without her realizing. But then I remembered her eyes at the cafe, how they slid away from mine, how her words tripped over themselves while Darren smiled too smoothly. I pressed my hand against my forehead. "Marla," I whispered, the name breaking in my throat. My daughter, my only child, the one I once carried on my shoulders down Main Street after her first school play. Could she really do this knowingly? The screen dimmed, pulling me back to the present. The numbers didn't lie, and numbers had no sympathy for old men who trusted too much. I pushed back from the table and began pacing. Each step across the kitchen floor echoed louder than the last, as though the house itself knew what had been done to me. I replayed the whispers I'd overheard in the grocery aisle. The way strangers had spoken with certainty, not speculation. I remembered the bank teller's hesitation, the junior clerk's warning about the power of attorney, and then the cafe, Marla's denial, Darren's smirk. My shadow stretched long against the wall, cast by the faint glow of the phone in my hand. It followed me like a darker self, one that refused to stay quiet. Anger surged, but so did sorrow, the two colliding until I could barely breathe. I stopped by the window, looking out at the silent street, and clenched my fists. I couldn't afford to lash out. Not yet. Not without proof. My body finally guided me to the old armchair by the fireplace. The one my wife used to claim every evening. The fabric was worn, faded in places where her arms had rested, but it still held her memory like a pressed flower. On the mantel sat her photograph. Framed in wood she'd insisted we keep even when newer frames were in fashion. Her smile met me there, steady and kind, as though she were still reminding me of the things we used to promise each other. Honesty, caution, resilience. I could almost hear her voice again. Never sign anything without reading it twice. Lou. She'd said it so many times, a simple reminder, almost playful, yet tonight it rang like a warning from the grave. I rested my head back, my chest tight. If you were here, Margaret, I murmured to the photograph, you'd tell me to stay sharp. You'd tell me not to let them win. The ache of missing her blended with the raw edge of betrayal until I felt hollow and heavy all at once. But within that emptiness was something sharper, a renewed determination. I straightened in the chair, still holding the phone, my eyes fixed on her smile in that picture, steady as a compass pointing me back to myself. If you were here, I whispered, you'd tell me to fight. I wouldn't storm into Marla's house, wouldn't throw accusations that Darren could twist back on me. No, I would watch, learn, and gather every piece of evidence. Quiet vigilance was my weapon now, just as I thought I'd steadied myself. The phone buzzed again in my hand, another alert, another attempted charge. My pulse quickened, my grip tightening on the device. That's when I knew this was only the beginning. The crisp air of early November carried with it the smell of burning leaves and damp earth as I walked down the sidewalk toward my house. The neighborhood was as it had always been, quiet, dependable, the kind of place where you waved to the same faces year after year. Yet that night, the comfort of routine felt thinner, like a curtain ready to tear. Eldon Maris was crouched near his porch steps. Fiddling with the doorbell camera, he bragged about every chance he got. He was younger than me by a decade, but still old enough to carry the same creaks in his knees. I gave him a nod. "Evening, Lou," he said, pushing himself up with a grunt. "This thing's smarter than I am half the time. Keeps track of everything that moves." I managed a chuckle, but it died when he lowered his voice and motioned me closer. "Say, I meant to tell you. Caught something on here last week. You might want to see it." "Your girl and her husband standing right on your porch when you weren't home." The words dug into me. My chest tightened as I followed him inside, into the glow of his living room. He tapped at his phone, then angled it toward me. On the screen, Marla and Darren appeared, their shapes framed by the glow of the porch light. Marla glanced around nervously, her arms folded. Darren bent near my mailbox, pulling out envelopes and thumbing through them. Their whispers were faint, distorted, but their intent was clear as day. "They shouldn't have been there," I muttered, gripping the armrest of Eldon's chair. He hesitated. "Want me to save a copy?" I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, please do." I asked him to replay it, and I watched again, this time focusing on the details. Darren held a folded paper in his hand. When the porch light caught it just right, my name flickered across the surface before he tucked it into his jacket. That was enough. I didn't need the audio to know what I was seeing. My daughter complicit, my son-in-law orchestrating. The betrayal that had been whispers and suspicions was now solid, undeniable, preserved in pixels and sound. I leaned back, my breathing heavy. "Thank you, Eldon," I said quietly. "This stays between us." He nodded, concern written across his weathered face. You've always been straight with me, Lou. If there's more I can do—" "No," I interrupted. "Not yet. Just keep this safe." Walking home, the cold night felt sharper. Each step echoed the new weight I carried, proof. It wasn't hearsay anymore, not some trick of paranoia. They had stepped onto my porch, into my life, with no shame in their actions. A few days later, the mailbox offered its own insult. Among the usual bills and flyers sat a thick envelope stamped with hospital insignia. I tore it open at the kitchen table, only to find a statement of charges, tests and treatments I had never undergone, appointments I had never scheduled, all under my name. The numbers mocked me, more than I could ever afford on my own, and the due date glared from the page. My insurance had been used. I sat frozen, the paper trembling in my hands. For a long time, I stared at it, my mind circling around the same impossible question. How far were they willing to go? But panic only clouded judgment. I pulled out the old ledger I kept in the desk drawer and began writing. I recorded the date, the bill number, every charge listed. On the next page, I noted the footage Eldon had saved, the bank alerts from nights before, the cafe meeting where Marla's eyes had darted away. If they thought they could bleed me dry, they would at least leave behind a trail I could follow. That night, I sat in Margaret's old armchair again. The hospital bill spread across my lap. Her picture on the mantel seemed to watch me. I remembered how she had always defended Marla, even in her worst mistakes. "She means well," Margaret would say. "She just needs guidance." But guidance was no longer enough. Denial had become dangerous. I could almost hear her voice urging me toward caution, not to let grief cloud my judgment. So I started cataloging, carefully, methodically, footage, bills, statements. Each piece would matter someday. I refused to be cornered without armor. The sun had dipped low when the phone rang, its sharp tone cutting through the quiet. I reached for it, expecting another bank alert or a neighbor's reminder about yard work. But the screen showed one name, Marla. I froze, the hospital bill still under my hand. My pulse raced as the phone buzzed again. My daughter wanted to talk. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her voice. The invitation came with a text that was short and stiff, almost like it had been written by someone else. Dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m. Marla. No smiley faces, no warmth, nothing that suggested a daughter reaching out to her father. Still, I told myself it was a chance, maybe even a peace offering after weeks of silence. When I arrived, the November air carried a damp chill, and the warm glow spilling from Marla's windows looked more like a stage than a home. I stepped inside, and the house greeted me with the faint scent of lemon polish and something roasting in the oven. The dining room table was already set. 8 chairs gleamed under the chandelier's light, and mine, my chair, sat all the way at the end, as if they were reminding me where I stood now. Marla greeted me with a quick hug that felt more like courtesy than affection. "Glad you could make it, Dad," she said, her eyes darting past me as if she had somewhere better to be. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, though I already felt like a guest in a place that should have been mine to feel welcome. We sat down, and the first course came out. Darren filled the room with his voice, steering every conversation like he was the captain of a ship no one else had signed on to. He bragged about new investments, about smart moves with accounts, and tossed financial terms around as though he were giving a lecture. Marla moved from plate to plate, placing portions in front of everyone. She skipped me until the very last, sliding the dish toward me with a strained smile. I noticed. Callie noticed too, her little eyes flicking from her mother to me. I picked up my fork, trying to steady my hands, each detail stacked like bricks in a wall. Darren's laughter, Marla's averted gaze, the careful orchestration of distance. This wasn't family dinner. This was theater. "Dad," Darren said suddenly, his tone smooth, too smooth, "you really should let us handle things for you. With your age, you might not even remember half of what's in those accounts." A ripple of laughter spread across the table. Marla gave a nervous chuckle, but she didn't stop him. She didn't defend me. I pressed my palm against the tablecloth to hide the tremor.
Forgetfulness comes with the territory, right? Darren added, looking around like he'd just landed a punchline at my expense. Marla's laugh stuck in my ears, thin, complicit. But Callie didn't laugh. Her fork clinked against her plate, and she looked straight at me, her brows knitting with worry. That single glance gave me a strength I didn't know I had left. I cleared my throat. Darren, you don't get to talk about me that way. My voice was steady, though my heart pounded hard enough to rattle my chest. Marla shot me a warning look. Dad, please, let's not make this dramatic. The words cut deeper than Darren's jabs. My own daughter, silencing me in front of everyone. I pushed back from the table slightly, keeping my composure. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't give them that. But inside, a fire burned hot. My dignity was not theirs to dismantle. The rest of the meal crawled by. I tasted none of it. The voices around me blurred into a hum, punctuated by Darren's constant crowing and Marla's occasional agreement. Finally, dessert came and went. Chairs scraped back. Conversations drifted into other rooms. No one looked at me. No one thanked me for coming. I stood, pushing in my chair quietly. Callie slipped from her seat and came to my side. She didn't say a word, just slipped her small hand into mine for a brief moment, a touch full of questions and loyalty all at once. I let go before anyone could see. My coat felt heavy on my shoulders as I walked toward the door. That's when I heard it. Darren's low murmur, meant for Marla, but carrying just far enough. He won't fight back. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. The words settled like iron in my chest. For the first time, I knew I had to prove him wrong. The envelope came in the late afternoon mail. I carried it inside, the November sky already sinking into early darkness. I slid it open at the kitchen table, the light above buzzing faintly, and unfolded what looked like an official property transfer notice. My eyes went first to the signature at the bottom. It was my name, written with a hand that was almost convincing, too practiced, too clean, but not mine. I studied the swoop of the L, the uneven curl in the P. I'd been signing my name for over 70 years. I knew the rhythm of those letters better than I knew the lines on my own face. My chest tightened, then steadied into something colder. They think I'm too old to notice, I whispered, setting the paper flat against the table. That quiet fury anchored me more than fear ever could. The next morning, I took the document downtown to see Jonas Creel. Jonas had been a paralegal in his younger years, now working part-time as a notary, tucked into a narrow office between a pawn shop and a tax prep place. The man hadn't lost his eye for details. He adjusted his glasses as I slid the notice across his desk. Take your time. Jonas? I told him. I need to know exactly what I'm looking at. Jonas turned the paper this way and that, his lips pressing into a thin line. The seal's wrong, he said finally, pointing with a blunt finger. It looks embossed, but not in the way we do it. And this signature, he shook his head. It's a decent imitation, but it isn't yours. Hearing him confirm it sent a shiver down my spine. I'd been prepared to doubt myself, to wonder if age had blurred my own memory. But Jonas's certainty erased any self-doubt. It horrified me, and yet I felt vindicated. So, someone forged it, I said flatly. More than that, Jonas replied. They tampered with a seal. That's fraud, through and through. I sat back, staring at the paper as if it might answer the question already searing in my chest. Why would my own daughter allow this? Jonas leaned back, tapping the edge of the desk. You know, he said slowly, I notarized a revision of your will years ago, back when your wife was still alive. I've still got the file. Real signatures, real seals. If this ever came down to proof, that file could be your anchor. Relief washed through me in one wave, dread in the next. That file meant safety, yes, but it also meant Marla and Darren had already crossed a line I hadn't thought possible. They've orchestrated this, I muttered, my voice sharper than I intended. Together. She didn't just look away, she was part of it. Jonas studied me for a long moment before nodding. You'll need to be careful, but you've got truth on your side. That night, I sat in my living room,
the forged notice in one hand and Jonas's memory echoing in my mind. On the coffee table lay a folder of documents I'd begun collecting. Bank alerts, the hospital bill, and now this transfer notice. My wife's photograph rested above it all, her steady gaze holding me accountable from across time. I whispered into the quiet, "If they want a war, I'll give them one, but on my terms." The words settled in my chest, not as bluster, but as a vow. I would not run to confront them with anger that could be twisted against me. I would hold my silence, sharpen it, and let it become the blade they would never see coming. Near midnight, my phone buzzed on the table, the screen lit with Marla's name. The message was brief. "Dad, we need you to sign some papers tomorrow." Urgent. I read it once, then again, each word settling heavier than the last. Urgent. Papers. Sign. The audacity was staggering. I leaned back, the shadows deepening across the room, and whispered to myself, "Not this time." I reached for my coat, sliding Jonas's folder into an inside pocket. If they wanted me to walk into their trap, I'd walk in, but not empty-handed. For the first time, I felt not only prepared, but dangerous. I walked into Marla's house with Jonas's folder still tucked under my arm, though I hadn't told her or Darren about it. She'd invited me over with a vague mention of sorting things out, but I'd lived long enough to recognize bait when I saw it. The polished dining room looked staged, every chair aligned, every surface shining as though appearances alone could wash away deceit. Darren greeted me with that salesman's grin he wore like armor. "Glad you could make it, Pops," he said. Too loud, too cheerful. Marla hovered behind him, her eyes avoiding mine. I took my seat, resisting the urge to slam the folder down. Instead, I asked quietly, "So, what's this about?" Darren's grin shifted, sharp as a knife. "It's about accountability. Your finances have been concerning. Some irregularities we can't ignore." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" He leaned across the table and dropped a stack of papers in front of me. Withdrawals, transfers, inconsistencies. If I didn't know better, I'd say someone was forging signatures. The words hung heavy. My own son-in-law, turning the accusation back on me. Marla's lips trembled, but she stayed silent. That silence cut deeper than any accusation. "Mismanaging funds?" I repeated, staring at the slips. Each showed my name, my supposed authorization. But I knew the movements of my own pen. They weren't mine. Darren spread his hands like a lawyer making a closing argument. "We want to help you, Llewellyn, but this can't go on. Maybe it's forgetfulness. Maybe worse. But we can't let it spiral." I looked at Marla, hoping for even a flicker of doubt, but she only shifted in her seat. "Dad," she whispered. "Is it true?" The room tilted. My own daughter, questioning me in my enemy's script. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice steady. "I have never stolen a cent. Never." Darren clucked his tongue. "Denial is a powerful thing, but denial doesn't pay bills." He slid the papers closer, as if each sheet were a dagger driven into my chest. I stood, pushing back the chair slowly. "You think you're clever," I said evenly. "But paper lies when the pen is dirty." He smirked. "Or when the hand is unsteady." Humiliation clawed at me, but I swallowed it whole. They wanted rage. I gave them calm. Back home. The cold December air bit at my face as I sat on the porch, trying to slow the storm in my chest. The rocking chair creaked under my weight, every sound amplified by anger I refused to spill. "Evening, Lou," came a voice from the sidewalk. Eldon Maris, my neighbor, raised a hand. He shuffled closer, his beanie pulled low against the chill. "You got a minute?" he asked. I nodded, too tired to pretend otherwise. He stepped onto the porch and lowered his voice. "I thought you should see this." He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen until a grainy video filled it. The feed from his doorbell camera. I leaned in. The timestamp showed late at night, 2 weeks back. Darren, hood pulled up, stood at my mailbox. He rifled through envelopes, pulled a few out, and stuffed them into his jacket. Eldon looked at me carefully. "I saved the file. Figured you might need it." For the first time in weeks, heat surged in my chest that wasn't despair. It was hope sharpened into purpose. Proof. I clasped his shoulder. You don't know what you've just given me, Eldon, but I'll never forget it. Later that night, I sat at my desk, the glow of the lamp throwing shadows across the forged slips in Eldon's footage. Decades of sacrifice ran through my mind. The overtime shifts, the mortgage I bled to pay down, the tuition I'd scraped together so Marla wouldn't have to borrow. And this was my repayment, a son-in-law trying to bury me alive, a daughter too blind or too frightened to see. I touched the photo of my wife on the desk, her smile frozen in better years. They won't erase me, I whispered. Not after all we built. I began organizing. Jonas's notary file, Eldon's video, the fraudulent slips. Each piece was a weapon, each record a shield. My silence would be my strongest defense, until the moment came to strike. The phone rang near midnight. I almost didn't answer, but the name on the screen made me pick it up. Darren's voice oozed confidence. Tomorrow, he said, the family will know who you really are. I gripped the receiver tight enough to whiten my knuckles. My voice was low, steady. So will they. Darren, so will they. I hung up, the house silent except for my own breathing. The stage was set. Two sides, both armed with stories. Only one armed with truth. The December chill followed me into Marla's living room as I stepped across the threshold. The air inside was no warmer. Every chair had been arranged in a circle, as though this were a courtroom and not a home. Darren stood near the mantel, posture straight, chest puffed out, his smile sharpened into something rehearsed. Marla fussed with glasses on the coffee table, but her hands shook slightly. I knew it was a trap, an ambush dressed as a family meeting. Still, I came prepared. Jonas's notarized file sat inside my briefcase, Eldon's footage ready on a small device in my coat pocket. My granddaughter Callie slid into a chair close to mine, her eyes darting toward me with the faintest nod. That silent gesture gave me enough strength to sit calmly, even as whispers stirred around the room. Darren opened with his best courtroom voice. We're here tonight to deal with matters that can't wait, for the good of the family. He laid a stack of papers on the table. Your father's been careless with his estate, he said, gesturing toward me. Signatures that don't match. Funds missing. We can't ignore it anymore. Marla glanced down, avoiding my gaze. Her nod was slow, reluctant, but she gave it anyway. That one movement felt like betrayal chiseling into stone. Relatives shifted in their chairs. I heard muttered phrases. Such a shame. He's not the same man. Darren thrived on the tension, spreading his lies like a practiced politician. He slid the papers closer. Look here, he said, pointing to the so-called withdrawals. This isn't just sloppy. It's reckless. He's unfit to manage what's left. I stayed silent, my jaw locked, but my hands rested calmly on my knees. They expected a frail man sputtering in denial. Instead, I gave them patience sharpened to a blade. The hush was broken by Callie's voice, trembling, yet clear. That's not true. Every head turned. My granddaughter's cheeks flushed, but she didn't back down. Grandpa isn't forgetful. He's not senile. He notices everything. You're twisting this. Her mother gasped, reaching for her arm, but Callie pulled away. No, Mom, I've watched how Darren talks to him, always belittling, always making him seem small. I won't stay quiet. The room froze. Even Marla looked startled, her carefully rehearsed distance cracking for the first time. I put a hand over Callie's. You don't need to fight for me, I whispered, but her eyes burned with loyalty. Someone has to. It was time. I drew the device from my pocket and tapped the screen. Eldon's video appeared, grainy but clear enough. Darren, caught in the dead of night, rifling through my mailbox. His hood couldn't hide the shape of his shoulders, the tilt of his walk. Gasps rippled across the room. I let the silence weigh heavy before speaking. Paper can lie. Ink can be forged. But cameras don't forget. Jonas rose slowly from his chair, holding out a folder. I notarized Mr. Pierce's signature years ago. This, he tapped one of Darren's forgeries, isn't his hand. The seal was tampered with. Marla's lips parted, words caught in her throat. And then Ramona Trask, the family's longtime accountant, stepped forward. She carried her own file, eyes locked on Darren. I traced unusual transfers, money rerouted through accounts tied directly to you. Care to explain that? The weight of evidence pressed down. The room no longer whispered, it stood in stunned silence. Darren snapped, his composure shattered, his voice rising to a shout. "This is garbage!" He slammed his fist against the table, sending glasses rattling. Marla stumbled back into her chair, face pale, torn between the man she'd chosen and the father she was losing. Her eyes darted to me, wide with shame and fear. Darren grabbed his coat, storming toward the door. "This isn't over," he spat, before vanishing into the night. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Marla pressed her hands to her face. Callie reached for me, her grip steady. I looked around at the fractured circle of family, every eye heavy with the weight of truth. My voice was low, steady. "This isn't finished. Tomorrow, the law will decide." No one spoke, but for the first time in weeks, the room belonged to me again. The morning after that storm of a family gathering, I woke to silence. My house felt hollow, the kind of stillness that presses against your chest. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint light pushing through the blinds. The victory from last night, that flash of truth tearing through Darren's lies, should have felt sweet. Instead, it tasted bitter. My daughter's face lingered in my memory, not with pride, not even with anger, but with the look of someone who chose to turn away. Vindication didn't erase betrayal. I shuffled into the kitchen, set coffee to brew, and listened to the hum of the machine. No footsteps from family, no chatter of children, no warmth that a home should hold. Just me and the echo of my wife's photograph on the wall. Her steady eyes a reminder that justice often comes with a cost. I whispered to her frame. I told them the truth, but I don't know if I won anything at all. By midday, the phone had rung twice. Both times I stared at the screen. Marla. I couldn't bring myself to answer, though I wanted to hear her voice. When I let it ring through, the silence afterward burned worse than the accusation. She wasn't calling to apologize. Deep down, I knew she was still standing by Darren. Callie showed up just as the afternoon shadows lengthened. She carried 2 bags, sandwiches from the corner deli and a stack of books she thought might distract me. She placed them on the table with a small smile. "I don't want you sitting here alone all day, Grandpa," she said, pulling out a chair. I managed to smile for her sake. "You're too good to me." "No," she said firmly. "You've been good to me. Now it's my turn." Her loyalty was a balm, but it also cut deep. "The hardest part," I confessed, "isn't the money or the lies. It's your mother's silence. That hurts more than anything they've tried to take." Callie reached for my hand, squeezing it with quiet strength. "She'll see it one day, but even if she doesn't, I see it." "I see you." For the first time since the meeting, I let myself exhale fully. Later that week, Ramona Trask called. Her voice carried the steady rhythm of someone used to numbers, facts, and evidence. "I've filed a formal complaint," she told me. "The financial proof is solid, withdrawals tied to Darren, transfers he can't explain away. This isn't just suspicion anymore, it's evidence the court will listen to." I felt a shift inside me, a lifeline thrown across the chasm. "You've given me more than numbers, Ramona. You've given me a chance." She paused, her tone softening. "You deserve that much, and more." When I hung up, I sat in my study with the files spread before me. It wasn't victory yet, but for the first time, the path ahead looked less like a battlefield and more like a road toward justice. By Friday, Callie insisted on accompanying me to the courthouse. The December air cut sharp as we stepped onto the stone steps, papers clutched under my arm. I expected anonymity, just a man filing a petition. Instead, flashbulbs popped. Voices called out my name. Local reporters had caught the scent of scandal. I squared my shoulders, surprised at my own calm. Callie whispered, "Do you want me to shield you?" I shook my head. No, let them see the truth. As we moved toward the doors, I kept my pace steady. Each step a declaration that I was not the frail man Darren painted me to be. I wasn't here to fade quietly. I was here to fight. When I emerged later, papers filed and time-stamped, I spotted her. Marla stood across the street, coat pulled tight, eyes locked on me. For a moment, I thought she might cross, might run into my arms the way she once did as a child, but hesitation held her. Darren appeared at her side, hand gripping her elbow. She glanced back at me, her eyes filled with a storm, conflict, sorrow, maybe even love buried under fear. Then she turned away, following him into the crowd. I stood rooted to the steps, watching until they disappeared. My chest ached, but my resolve didn't waver. I drew in a slow breath and murmured to myself, even if I lose her, I won't lose myself. The law was now in motion, and there was no turning back. In a town like Asheville, news doesn't just travel, it spreads like a fire catching dry leaves. By the time I stepped into the market the next morning, whispers had already turned into full conversations. I caught fragments as I passed the produce aisle. "That's Pierce, isn't it? The one suing his own daughter?" Another voice chimed in, lower but sharp enough for me to hear. "Family feuds over money, always ugly." I pretended to study apples, my hand hovering over them longer than necessary. My stomach tightened with each hushed remark. Shame clung to me, not because I'd done wrong, but because my life, my private battle, was now public gossip. Callie stood beside me, head high, unshaken. She leaned close and whispered, "Let them talk. Truth shines longer than lies." Her words steadied me, pride mixed with the sting of humiliation. I nodded, dropped apples into the basket, and walked out without looking back. The courthouse carried a different weight that afternoon. Its stone walls echoed with formality, its halls with tension. Inside the courtroom, Darren sat as if he owned the place, jaw lifted, smugness carved into every line of his face. Marla was at his side, shoulders tight, gaze fixed anywhere but me. The judge called us to order. Darren's attorney spoke first, his voice slick, brushing away the accusations as though they were rumors without substance. Darren himself leaned forward, denying wrongdoing with the confidence of a man certain of his grip on the narrative. When it was our turn, Jonas Creel rose, steady and deliberate. He laid out documents with a precision that reminded me why I'd trusted him all these years. "Your Honor," Jonas said, "these notarized records were filed by Mr. Pierce years ago. They show intent to protect his estate against exactly this kind of betrayal. The signatures here, authenticated, preserved, stand in direct contrast to the forgeries submitted." The room shifted. Murmurs rippled across the benches. I watched Darren's smirk falter, just for a breath, but it was enough. I could see the mask slip. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. "There are too many inconsistencies in these financial records. This court orders a deeper investigation into the accounts and transfers associated with Mr. Pierce and Mr. Lockett." The words hung heavy. Darren's bravado cracked, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting toward Marla as if demanding she rescue him with loyalty. She didn't. She stared at the table, hands knotted in her lap, refusing to meet my gaze. That silence from her pierced sharper than any accusation Darren had made. For years I'd told myself denial was safer than confrontation, but as the judge's gavel echoed, I knew denial had nearly cost me everything. Vindication was within reach, yet it came wrapped in heartbreak. After the hearing, Callie suggested we get something to eat. We ended up at a small diner, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that smelled stronger than it tasted. The waitress poured our cups without asking, as though she knew we needed them. Jonas slid into the booth beside me, his tie loosened, his eyes sharp. "You held your ground well in there," he said. I nodded, though the weight hadn't lifted. "It doesn't feel like a victory yet." Jonas stirred his coffee. "It's not yet, but the case is stronger than Darren ever expected." He'll fight dirtier now. You should be ready for that. Callie reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on mine. You're not alone in this, she said. That simple touch, her steady eyes, gave me more courage than any legal file. We ate quietly after that, the clatter of dishes around us filling the silence we didn't need to break. Night fell by the time I got home. The mailbox creaked as I opened it, the metal colder than the air around me. Inside was an envelope with no return address. I carried it inside, set it on the table, and stared at it longer than I should have before tearing it open. A single sheet of paper. Block letters typed in bold. Drop the case, or you'll regret it. I felt the weight of the threat press into my chest. For a moment, I thought of Marla. Wondered if she knew just how far Darren, or whoever stood with him, was willing to go. My hands tightened around the paper until it crumpled. I set it down, leaned over the table, and whispered into the stillness of the house. They've underestimated me once too often. This wasn't fear tightening in my chest. It was resolve. Sharper. Stronger than it had ever been. The price of betrayal had already been paid. Now, it was time to make sure it wasn't mine alone to bear. The courthouse chambers were colder than the courtroom itself. Not because of temperature, but because of the way the silence pressed down on all of us. The judge sat at the head of the long oak table, papers stacked neatly in front of him. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in his tone made even Darren stop tapping his pen. We are here for mediation, the judge said, not another performance. I sat across from my daughter and her husband, steadying my breath. Darren leaned forward, his suit jacket stretched tight across his shoulders, his tone oily. Your Honor, this case is nonsense. It should be dismissed outright. My father-in-law is wasting the court's time. I kept my hands folded, my voice calm. I came here for clarity, not dismissal. If I'm guilty, let the record show it. If I'm not, then let the truth stand. Marla sat between us, silent, her eyes darting back and forth like she was caught between two storms. I tried to catch her gaze, but she looked down at her clasped hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The judge leaned slightly toward Marla. Mrs. Hennessy, the court would like to hear from you. Do you believe your father mismanaged funds, or do you believe Mr. Lockett's account? Marla's breath caught audibly. Her lips trembled as if the words refused to form. Darren nudged her with his elbow, whispering, Go on, tell him. Her eyes filled with water. She tried to blink away. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. The sound of it split me in two. She couldn't bring herself to side with me, but she couldn't condemn me either. That hesitation, so brief yet so telling, gave me both a wound and a glimmer of hope. I leaned back in my chair, swallowing the ache that pressed at my throat. My daughter was still lost, but at least not completely gone. The judge observed quietly, then nodded. Your silence speaks of conflict, Mrs. Hennessy. This case will move forward. Darren shot up from his chair, his face darkening. This is outrageous. You're freezing assets over hesitation. This is ridiculous. His voice boomed against the chamber walls, breaking the calm facade he usually wore. The judge's gavel struck once. Mr. Lockett, sit down. The accounts in question will be frozen until further notice. This court requires a thorough review of every transfer under your name. If you object, file it through counsel, not in this chamber. Marla flinched at his tone, shrinking away from Darren's sudden fury. Darren slammed his folder shut, nearly tearing the papers inside. He muttered curses under his breath, storming toward the door. This isn't justice, it's a circus. Marla remained seated, pale and shaken. She didn't follow him out immediately. For the first time, I saw her recoil from him instead of defending him. That image, her shrinking back as he left in a storm, stuck with me like a quiet promise that the balance had begun to shift. That evening, the porch of my home felt like a sanctuary. Callie sat beside me, her young face lit by the fading orange glow of the sunset. She wrapped her hands around a mug of cocoa I'd made, though she seemed more focused on watching me than drinking it. You held strong today, she said softly. I let out a long breath. Strong, maybe, but strength doesn't stop the hurt. I gazed out at the bare trees, their branches etched like scars against the winter sky. Your mother, she couldn't say the words. She couldn't defend me. That silence may have saved me in court, but it cut deeper than anything Darren ever said. Callie reached over, resting her hand on mine. Grandpa, you've carried this family longer than anyone knows. You gave her a life, a home, everything. Maybe she's blind to it now, but that doesn't erase what you did. Her words steadied something inside me. I realized then that my legacy wasn't in the property lines Darren tried to steal, but in the dignity I refused to surrender, and in the love still alive in the granddaughter sitting next to me. We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that healed instead of wounded. Night had fallen when headlights swept across the porch. I squinted toward the street and saw Marla's car pull up slowly. She didn't turn off the engine. She just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the house as though the front door were a wall she couldn't climb. I stood, leaning against the porch railing, waiting. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine through the glass. Something passed between us, guilt, sorrow, maybe even longing, but she didn't move. After a minute, she pulled away, the car rolling down the street until the taillights vanished. I whispered into the night, the cold air carrying my words like a vow. Maybe one day, she'll come back. Until then, I stand. The words weren't loud, but they were solid. A father's heart may break, but it doesn't surrender. The final hearing began with a gravity that pressed on my chest heavier than any weight I'd carried before. The judge's voice was calm, but the words were like hammers striking stone. This court finds Darren Lockett guilty of fraud and asset manipulation. Evidence presented, including video surveillance and notarized documents, confirms beyond doubt the intentional deception. I sat still, though inside me a storm raged. The bailiff moved toward Darren, who sprang up, shouting, "This is a sham!" His face flushed crimson, hands gripping the table like he could bend it with his anger. The judge didn't flinch. "You will be escorted out. This courtroom is not a stage for tantrums." Darren's eyes darted wildly around the room, looking for Marla, for support, for anything, but she sat frozen, her hands knotted in her lap. When the bailiff placed a hand on his shoulder, he jerked back, but it was useless. Rage had no power here. They led him away as his words echoed off the paneled walls, a hollow protest fading into nothing. I let out a long, quiet breath. Triumph had come, not loud and showy, but firm and undeniable. When the gavel's echo settled, Marla's body trembled. She clutched the edge of her chair, her face pale as paper. For the first time, I saw not defiance but collapse. She rose, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Dad, I didn't know." I swear I didn't know it was this deep. I wanted to stand, to hold her, to say the words that had burned in me for years. "You're still my daughter." But something inside whispered that rushing in now would erase the very dignity I had fought to preserve. So I kept my distance. My tone was measured. "Marla, I told you long ago, respect is worth more than money. You chose him, and now you've seen what that choice carried." She reached toward me, but I didn't move closer, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. If I embraced her now, it would be on her terms of weakness, not on the foundation of truth I had fought so hard to keep. Dignity first, bitterness second. I reminded myself of that as I turned away. Her sobs filled the room, but I stood firm. Outside, the winter air cut sharp, and the courthouse steps seemed endless. Then I felt a small but steady arm slip through mine. Callie pressed close, her young face lifted to me with pride I had not seen in years. "You didn't just fight for yourself, Grandpa," she said, her voice strong even against the December wind. "You fought for respect, for all of us. You showed us what it means not to bend when it matters most." I swallowed hard, emotion swelling in my chest. For all the nights I lay awake fearing my sacrifices were wasted, her words were proof they were not. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. In that moment, victory wasn't in the courthouse. It was here, in the bond that no lie could break. That evening, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that finally felt earned. I sat on the porch, rocking slowly as the cold sky deepened above. The wood beneath my hands felt familiar, worn smooth by decades of use, just like the memories that clung to me. I thought of every betrayal, every insult thrown, every lonely night I had endured. Pain still lingered, but it no longer owned me. The truth had been preserved. My name, my dignity, would not be dragged through the mud by Darren's greed. The phone rang inside, and I answered to Jonas's steady voice. "It's official. The sentence will hold. He'll face prison time. They won't be able to wiggle out of it." I closed my eyes, relief settling deeper than joy ever could. "Thank you, Jonas, for everything." "Don't thank me," he said. "You carried this fight on your back. The rest of us just helped lift when we could." I hung up, returning to the porch where the cold air felt almost cleansing. Later that night, as the stars broke through the dark sky, I found myself speaking not to the empty yard, but to the generations who would one day hear my story. "Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from your own blood," I murmured. "But silence in the face of injustice is worse. To protect dignity, your own and your family's, that is the greatest inheritance a parent can give." I knew Marla's wounds would not heal quickly, maybe not at all. She might never cross back into this home, but Callie had seen, and Callie would remember. She would carry the lesson forward, that standing for truth, no matter the cost, is the foundation of every legacy worth leaving. I leaned back in my chair, watching my breath rise into the night air. I was not broken. I was not finished. I was a man who had faced the worst his family could throw at him, and still, I stood,